Welcome to ESSA's Fall Prevention for Older Adults with Injury Matters webinar. My name's Lauren Sexton. I'm a Member Development Advisor here at ESSA, and I'll be your MC for today's webinar. Before we start, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of land, seas and waters throughout Australia, particularly on the lands on which we are meeting today, and pay respect to elders past, present and future. ESSA would also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today. We recognise that the health, social and emotional well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are grounded in continued connection to culture, country, language and community. Just a few instructions on how the ESSA webinar will work today. In today's webinar, the full screen will contain the presentation and webcam of the presenter. To ask a question, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please type your question when you have them. I'll collate these and ask them to the presenter on your behalf at the end of the presentation. Please be specific so it can be related back correctly. You can also raise your hand if you would like to be invited to the stage to ask a question. Please keep in mind that the session is being recorded for members to watch in the future. The workbook is available for you to download from the resources section under the documents tab. If you're having any trouble hearing or experiencing any other technical issues, please raise your hand and someone will send you a message. This presentation will take 1 hour. We will be finished by 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Today's webinar is being run in partnership with Injury Matters, a not-for-profit organisation aiming to innovate and deliver injury prevention and recovery programs in Western Australia. Our presenter today is Marianne Fabling, an AHPRA-registered physiotherapist. Marianne is currently working as an injury prevention specialist and rehabilitation program physiotherapist, while also providing working allied health education coordination and workshop delivery at Injury Matters since early 2022. She has also held allied health leadership positions where she has set up and led programs to older adults with a falls prevention focus across public, private and not-for-profit sectors. She holds a postgraduate qualification in business management and an occupational health qualification. Thanks so much for joining us today, Marianne. Over to you.
Thank you for having me. Welcome to the Falls Prevention for Older Adults Evidence-Based Screening and Exercise Strategies presentation. We would also like to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people, which is the land from which we're presenting from today. And as Lauren said, if anyone has any questions, if you type them into the screen, we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Stay on Your Feet is one branch of Injury Matters, and it is WA's leading falls prevention program for older adults living in Western Australian community, with the aim to reduce falls and falls-related injuries and encourage confidence in independent living. And keeping people independently and safely living at home is my passion. It's what wakes me up in the morning and gets me motivated to go through my working day. So today what we're planning to do is give an overview of the falls data in Western Australia, because that's the data that we have, but it would be very similar in whichever state or territory that you are watching from in Australia today. The latest evidence-based recommendations regarding falls prevention. We're going to also look at the evidence-based screening tools, or what is recommended and how to use them, or some of them, and also just touch on the importance of safety, because obviously safety is paramount when you're dealing with people or doing interventions with people to do with falls, because they're probably prone to falls and we're not wanting to increase the chance of them falling. So just to start with a little bit of the falls related data in Western Australia. Before we look at the numbers, and you'll be seeing them on your screen now, the first time I saw this was probably about 4 years ago. I saw a previous version of this. This is an updated version. And after I left the presentation, I was wondering if that was the data for the whole of Australia or just for Western Australia. And this is the data just for Western Australian. So you can imagine it's a very much bigger numbers for the whole of Australia. So every 11 minutes, someone attended the emergency department due to falls-related injury in 2021. And every 15 minutes, someone was admitted to hospital with a falls-related injury. They spent on average 7.7 days in hospital, and every 19 hours, this is the one that really I thought related to the whole of Australia and not just Western Australia, every 19 hours, someone in Western Australia dies due to a falls-related injury. So you think our population is 2 million. A lot of the larger states, you think about the whole of the population of Australia, that's a lot of people dying every day because of a falls-related injury, and falls are largely preventable. So what is a fall? Just have a think about what you think a fall, the definition of a fall might be. It's an event which results in a person coming to rest unintentionally on the ground or other lower level. A slip, a trip, and a collapse are all falls. So a fall related to someone losing consciousness but ending on the ground or lower level is actually regarded as a fall. And a slip or a trip are also related as falls. Also, interestingly, if someone says, oh, I nearly fell, but luckily the bed was there and I fell, the bed caught me, that's actually a fall because it's a lower level. So is a chair, and so is falling upstairs. So today what we're going to look at is some of the collective, people have looked at the evidence and collated information for us. So we don't have to go ourselves when we're trying to find out the latest falls-related evidence. We can refer to these guidelines and the compendiums and the Cochran review, and there's many of them, and you can find out what the latest evidence is. And they're very easily downloadable, all of them, and you can find them all on the internet. So it's they're freely available to use. So firstly, many of you will be familiar with the World Health Organization's physical activity guidelines, which came out in 2020. There was a really catchy theme song that went, or theme tune that went with it. And it was just really setting the guidelines for people and physical activity. So it, for the first time, it set out the recommendations for people with chronic disease and also for the elderly and other subgroups as well. Basically, the message was that every move counts. So doing some exercise or activity is better than nothing. And we know that being physically active is also good in preventing falls, as well as other benefits that being physically active has. So basically the recommendation, as most of you are probably aware, is 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic physical activity per week, which is about 20 to 25 minutes a day. And this is also the recommendation for people aged over 65, so for older adults. But in addition to this, the World Health Organization recommends that on at least 2 days a week, the older adults do specific strengthening exercises of their large muscle groups. So that was something that has been an addition, and this is to counteract the aging, the muscle weakening, the sarcopenia that results with aging. And then also on at least 3 days a week, or we say every other day, as part of weekly physical activity, older adults should do varied multi-component physical activity, which challenges their balance. So that is in addition to the 2 day strengthening and the increase in physical activity. So we're just going to look at some of the compilations of evidence. So the CDC, or the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, is the US evidence and collection. and their 4th edition was released in 2022. So the purpose is to showcase specific evidence-based interventions, and this particular version or edition has 34 single interventions, 17 of those are exercise interventions, 5 are home modification, and there's 17 clinical interventions, and then there's 16 multifaceted interventions. So each one is summarised. So it summarises the published study and gives you more information about each study. And then it also gives you the link to the actual study itself, so that if you want to read more information on the study, you can actually read that study. So each is described as an overview, which population is studied, the location, so whether it was in rural Oregon or Sydney or Melbourne. It's a setting, so if it's home, individual or group intervention. It gives a description of the content, the duration of the study, and the profession who it was delivered by, and the minimum training requirements to implement the particular researched evidence that study is presenting. So here you can see these are the exercise interventions. So you can see there that the Otago program's listed and the LIFE program is listed there too, and we're going to talk more about those. And there's quite a few studies from Australia. There's the single interventions, and a lot of them are the home-based risk factor interventions. And then the clinical ones of interest here, I think there's the vibration therapy, a study done in 2014 in Hong Kong, which evaluated the use of a low magnitude, high frequency vibration. And there's also the perturbation-based gait stability training, which had a 50% reduction in falls after, I think it was a 15 to 30 minute intervention, where they put people in harnesses on a moving floor, and the perturbation was the change in direction or a change to the orientation while they were walking. And they did this many times throughout the study. From what I could tell, it's just a single 15 to 30 minute intervention, and it had at 12 months, over the 12-month period, a 50% reduction in falls. So I would think we're going to see more of that type of study come out with future research. And then there's the multifaceted intervention, which looks at many different sort of multidisciplinary interventions. And if you have a look, there's Stepping On is the second one mentioned, and that's a research study out of Sydney, and it's a falls prevention program, so a multidisciplinary falls prevention program, including a strengthening and balance component to that as well. So the World Falls Prevention Guidelines, if you think of the CDC compendium being the US, what the US have put together, I sort of think like the World Falls Prevention Guidelines is put together by the rest of the world. So there's a lot of Canadian, Australian and European and South American researchers. So the World Falls recommendations were released in November 2022. And usually when I present a falls prevention program to allied health professionals, nobody in the audience or in the workshop has heard of the falls prevention, World Falls Prevention Guidelines. And the only person ever that has was an exercise physiologist. So perhaps many of you have heard of this. So it's a panel of 96 experts in falls prevention from 39 countries, and they put together various working groups and steering committees, and they looked at the available research, and then they put together the guidelines based on the evidence and based on their expert opinion. So every time I read this, there's a summary, and there's also the full guidelines, which you can access. Every time I read it, I get something else out of it, because there is so much information in there. So there's information for specific categories of disease or chronic disease. And there's also guidelines for, what is the best that we should be giving to people to prevent falls. Just a bit of a summary. So they recommend a multifactorial assessment as well as screening tests. So you shouldn't just be doing screening tests, but should be doing a multifactorial assessment. They categorize or they stratify falls risk, and we'll talk about that in some future slides. They recommend referral to a physiotherapist for a targeted program where people have other components or other issues, so other medical conditions. And they say that strength and balance exercises improve strength and balance. They also recommend walking speed as a very good screening test that should be used. It's the one with the highest evidence available for screening tests. So this is a summary of the World Falls Prevention Guidelines. So basically they broke it into 10 key findings or key messages. And this is a way of just summarising, their recommendations. So it's things like, if you look at the screen, so many falls can be prevented, and falls and injury prevention needs multidisciplinary management. And then that estimates of risk future falls can be done by trained clinicians with simple resources and modifications to the approach. So each one of the key messages just looks at the different aspects of what their recommendations are. So number 6 is that multifactorial interventions, i.e. a combination of interventions tailored to the individual when delivered, are effective for reducing the rate of falls in high-risk community-dwelling adults. And basically, another one is that everyone who's admitted to hospital who's over the age of 65 should be treated as at risk and be given a full multifactorial assessment. So this is, world best standard, and it'll definitely affect some Australian guidelines that are going to be released at some point. We're waiting for them to come out at some point, and I'm sure this will inform what the Australian guidelines are. So with environmental risk factors, it recommends referral to a professional trained to address the environmental risk factors. So in that case, it would generally be an occupational therapist for the home assessment of risk factors. They identify and measure the risk factors. They recommend certain tools, and we'll go into that in some future slides. And also the importance of opportunistic interventions. So, a lot of older adults have not had a fall and they're not feeling unsteady, but it's that when you have that interaction with someone who's a well-aged person, is just giving them the recommendations that they should be strengthening their legs, they should be doing some strengthening exercises, and also doing some falls type activities, falls balance type activities each week to challenge their balance so that they're keeping finely tuned for falls prevention. They also, one of the things is the concern of falling. So it used to be called, or it still is called, largely fear of falling. And it's that, people who, whether or not they have fallen, and they reduce their activities and then spiral into that reducing their activity and then getting weaker and then getting more more prone to falling. So it used to be called fear of falling, but they recommend not using the word fear, but recommending it be called concern of falling. So that's the sort of level that it does go into. They also had an algorithm, and the CDC have an algorithm too, which I'll show you soon. And basically it's looking at that opportunistic, the opportunity when you're with older adults who haven't had a fall, but you ask them, even if they're at low risk, you give them some guidelines of what they should be doing to prevent falls. And then on the right side of the algorithm, it's people who present with a fall and the different path that they take. with, more targeted and individualized assessment. And then for those who are very frail, a full assessment to see what other, whether, musculoskeletal or neurological things need to be addressed. So the Cochran Library, which most of you would have heard of, is based in London, and they look at various reviews and various aspects of different medical conditions or interventions, and they give summaries regularly of the latest research. So the one that was most recently done, I think it's 2019, 2019 review, led by Kathy Sherrington, who is a physio from New South Wales, from Sydney. They looked at various exercise and strength interventions and looking at various exercise interventions. So generally, any exercise reduces the rate of falls by 24% compared to controls. But the inclusion of strength and balance exercises in those falls activities increases that to 34%. Tai Chi and other similar interventions have a 19% reduction in falls. Walking programs on their own have very low certainty evidence. So walking just on the flat and only walking will not improve somebody's chance of not falling. So it doesn't improve balance. Yoga also had very low evidence. There's currently, which surprises me, there's currently a large randomized controlled trial going on, which is has a very large number of participants throughout Australia, Canada, and I think Europe. And they're looking at yoga, and the results of that should be published sometime this year. Hydrotherapy, also there's not a large quality or exercises in water. There's not a large amount of quality evidence where there's it's a randomized controlled trial, so it's got strong evidence. But there is definitely evidence to support water exercises for improving balance. And the beauty of water exercises to improve balance is that the people can't fall. All they can do is get wet. So they could drown if they're not being watched closely. But if you are with somebody and they have particularly bad balance, water is a really good place for them to exercise. So basically the recommendations from the Cochran review are that there should be a high challenge to balance, that it should be 3 hours of exercise each week, that it's ongoing exercise, that it targets the general community as well as those that are increased risk of falls. It's group or home-based setting. There's evidence for both. Walking training, balance training, and strength training, but not walking training on its own. And specific populations require particular expertise and make referrals for risk factor management. So some of the evidence-based programs that I've already mentioned that come up in all of these reviews and compendiums and guidelines and recommendations, one is the Stepping On program. This one is, you can buy a book from Sydney University Press, which is very comprehensive and sets out how to run the program. It's a multidisciplinary program that runs over 8 weeks. It's really good to have a read through it and to get information from it. Even if you don't run the program as it's shown out, it's got very good, valuable information in there. And you can also get a lot of the slides and other collateral that goes with the Stepping On program off the Sydney University Press website. You can download it once you have the book. The Otago exercise program, we'll talk about a little bit more. The No Falls program is another one that you can search for, and you can download slides and recommended exercises. It's all there. And then also the LIFE program, which is the Lifestyle Integrated Functional Exercise program, which looks at a non-traditional way of exercise, which is the functional exercise, or incorporating extra activities or extra activities into the daily life of the person. So incorporating it so that it becomes habit. So this is a integration of balance and strength training into daily life. So it's a study done in released in 2012 out of New South Wales again. And it's looking at reducing the rate of falls in older people. And it looked at the lifestyle integrated functional exercise program, also a structured exercise program, so a more traditional strength and balance type exercise, which is more of the type of exercise that physiotherapists and exercise physiologists would normally do in a group or an individual, situation. And this was all individual. And what they called a sham, or which was just a gentle exercise session, so non-specific exercise. There were over 100 participants in each group, and it showed that the best evidence, or the best reduction in falls, was for the LIFE program. The structured exercise program also did have a reduction in falls, but the sham one didn't have a significant, didn't show a significant difference. So also around the same time, so 2012, out of the US, there was a study to do with the barriers to traditional strength and balance exercises. And it showed that only 21% of retired people are doing a structured exercise program. And it looked at the different barriers, so cost, transport. We know that transport is an issue for older people wanting to attend appointments or, ongoing exercise programs, unsuitable times, and that it wasn't appealing for many of them to do a structured exercise program. Another interesting study or way of thought is Daniel Kahneman's fast brain, slow brain theory, and looking at the different, what he calls the different systems. So system 2 is more the conscious, deliberate processes, so the slow brain. It's our usual health practice. So it's instructions and getting people to, put aside time and actually do the activities that as they've been instructed to them. So that's the system 2. And system 1, or the fast brain, is the engaging or the automatic processes. And there's more potential for long-term impact if something becomes more of a habit. So it's best to give simple advice and have externally triggered automatic responses to frequently encountered contexts, and to repeat a chosen behaviour in the same context until it becomes automatic. So when I started looking at the LIFE program, I thought, I'll give it a go. So every time I went to the fridge to fill my water bottle from the water dispenser, I do heel raises. And now every time I fill my water bottle, I do heel raises without even thinking about it. So it really does work. And so I'm strengthening my calf muscles every time I fill my water bottle now without thinking about it. So that's the idea of the LIFE program. This one also is available through Sydney University Press, but there is also quite a lot of information that you can download free from the internet. So there is a participant's manual and also a trainer's manual. And there's a lot of valuable information in both. And basically it's speaking to a client, speaking to the individual, working out with them what their activities are, and integrating the exercises that they do into their daily life. So like I said, with the water bottle at the fridge, but things like putting the toothbrush in a low shelf in the bathroom, so that every time they brush their teeth, they have to really squat down low and use their leg muscles to get the toothpaste and toothbrush and then put it away. So there's different things like that, but the person themselves decides what it is that they're going to do. So strength and balance retraining is the most widely investigated long-term effective fall prevention measure, and it also has cardiovascular, metabolic and self-confidence benefits in addition to greater stability. So that's a quote from Professor Campbell, who was the lead researcher with the Otago program. And then this is another quote. So the Otago program and its adaptations are the most widespread falls prevention programs worldwide. So if you're working in falls prevention, you will have heard of the Otago exercise program. When I first heard about it in the, I don't know, early 2000s, I thought Otago stood for something like it was OTAGO, but it's actually Otago based out of Otago University in New Zealand, and that's where the program was researched and developed. So it's the original Otago program was a structured home exercise program. It's definitely evidence-based. There were 4 original controlled trials involving 1,016 people, but there has been countless repeat trials or trials based on the Otago exercise program. There's warm-up, balance and strength components. You can decide whether or not the original does have a walking plan, but you can look at the risk versus benefit and decide whether it's beneficial to include a walking program in the Otago exercise program. It's easy to implement. It's cost effective, and as I said before, it's very easily adaptable and modifiable. You can use the Otago slides. They're very good slides for using as a group exercise or a circuit-based exercise, as well as an individual exercise program. Cochran et al. In 2016 looked at the Otago program and its many adaptations. The Otago program has at least an over 35% reduction in the number of falls and the severity of falls in those who are 65 and older. And it's most effective for people in that higher, more at risk age group. So the more at risk someone is of falling, the more benefit they gain from doing the strengthening and balance exercises. The Otago exercises are very simple, basic exercises. So it's been adapted in many, many ways. And so this research looked at Otago-based programs that retained the core elements of the Otago exercise program. So it covered groups, community groups, peer-led groups. There was augmented reality and then an online version, a DVD version, as well as other exercise components being added, so more high-level balance type exercises and vestibular exercises. So just looking at screening for falls prevention now, and we're going to look at a couple of tools or a few tools that can be used to screen, remembering that it's tools screening for exercise, for falls prevention and for the risk of falls. I mentioned before that the CDC have the STEADY algorithm. So STEADY stands for Stopping Elderly Accidents, Deaths and Injuries. And it's also from the CDC. It's very similar to the one that we saw in an earlier slide from the World Falls Prevention Guidelines. It also recommends that people who are screened not at risk, and it also recommends using opportunistic interventions to advocate that people do some strengthening and do some balance exercise. So the 3 key questions that you should ask an older adult, and it should just be routine when you see someone who's over 65, is: have you had a fall in the past year? Do you worry about falling? And do you feel unsteady when standing or walking? And so if any of those answers are yes, then they're no longer a low risk for fall. They move into that intermediate risk of falling. This is just a stratification from the World Falls Guidelines and from what, looking at 3 different ways of grouping people. So there's those at low risk of falls who should be offered education about falls prevention and exercise for general health. and then also attend a falls prevention strengthening program if they're interested. There's those at intermediate risk of falls, and in addition to the above, should be offered targeted exercise or referral. Now, the World Falls Guidelines say to a physiotherapist, but that would also be to an exercise physiologist to improve balance and muscle strength and reduce their falls risk. And then the high risk for falls are those that should be offered multifactorial assessment and a multidisciplinary approach and individualised tailored falls prevention interventions. And that's just, I'm not going to go into this, but that's just the same in a webinar. I've left the slide in there because the webinar is actually very good to listen to. It's by Kathy Sherrington, who I mentioned earlier, who's a leading Australian researcher in falls prevention. The NARI Research Institute have developed some falls prevention screening tools. You may or may not be aware of these. There's the FROPCOM assessment tool, which is a very, it asks many questions, including about falls history, and I just went a few too many slides ahead then. It consists of 13 different risk factors, and it's rating them 1 to 3, and then you get an overall risk screen. It's quite good if you're concerned about someone. The general practitioners, the general practices, they will often have to do this. Well, they do have to do it if they're referring into a Western Australian hospital-based falls program. So one of the things they need to do is a FROPCOM assessment. But there's also the FROPCOM screen, which is a very quick screening tool, which is a good thing to have, a good tool to have, just to work out whether someone is at risk of falling. And they can then use that if it's filled in by an allied health professional. They can use that and take it to their doctor to say, it would be really beneficial for them to be referred on to further exercise strengthening and balance programs by their health professional under the Medicare program, for example. So we had the World Falls Conference in Perth last November. There's one planned for Sydney in 2025. It was a lot of the World Falls Guidelines experts who were there presenting basically the findings from the World Falls Guidelines, as well as other research. So it was very much the experts presenting the latest research. The tools that were recommended, and this is just a shot, like a photo that I took as an audience member, were gait speed, timed up and go, the step test, and the 5 times sit to stand. The ones that have the strongest evidence, the one that has the strongest evidence and is recommended, is the gait speed, and then the timed up and go. So we're just going to have a look at those now. The instructions are there for you to read in the handout, but this is the timed up and go test first.
Strength and balance screening tests. Timed up and go. The timed up and go test measures the time it takes for someone to stand from a chair, walk 3 meters at their usual pace, turn and return to sit in their chair. It is designed to give a broad snapshot of someone's level of balance, mobility, and coordination, and indicate whether a more specific gait and mobility assessment is needed. To start, you will need a sturdy chair of a height of 43 centimeters to 45 centimeters with armrests, a mark that is 3 meters away from the chair, a stopwatch. The client should be wearing comfortable enclosed footwear and loose-fitting clothes.
Hi Greg, this test is to measure how steady you are when you're standing up, walking and sitting back down again. When I say go, I'll get you to stand up from the chair, walk to the 3 meter mark, turn around, walk back again and sit down. It's not a race, so go your normal walking speed. You may use your hands to stand up if you need to, and you can also use a walking aid as well if required. Andy will demonstrate for us. Okay, Andy, sit down. Ready, Andy? And go. Simple as that.
It is recommended to provide supervision to clients during this test, especially during turning, but no manual assistance should be given. A couple of practice trials will help clients to become used to what has been asked of them. Client can use normal walking aids.
Okay, Greg, remember when I say go, stand up, walk to the 3 metre mark, turn around, come back and sit down again. Remember, you may use your arms to help you stand up and sit down, and remember to walk at your normal walking pace. Are you ready? Go. Good, well done. And that's the timed up and go test.
The following table shows the timed up and go normative data for community dwelling adults. A time of greater than 12 seconds indicates that the client has reduced mobility and may be at increased risk of falling. The client may require a referral to a physiotherapist for specific gait and mobility assessment.
All right, the other, so that's the timed up and go. There's various modifications or variations of that. So often it is walking around the marker that is done. It's all sort of doing the same thing. The World Falls Guidelines actually says 15 seconds now, not 12 seconds. So it's a little bit slower than it's indicated by that, that video. The next one's the 10 metre walk test. Now, interestingly, the 10 metre walk test is now called walk speed test, and it can be modified and done over 6 metres or 4 metres if there's if there's not enough space to do it. So again, we're just going to have a look at the 10 metre walk test, and it's just a good summary of how to do the test.
Strength and balance screening tests. 10 metre walk test. The 10 metre walk test is designed to measure functional mobility and gait over a short distance. It can also be used to assess for spatial aspects of gait, such as stride length and step frequency. To start, you will need a walking path of up to 14 metres, 4 markers used to measure the actual distance, and 2 metres either side of the start and finish. You will also need a stopwatch. The client should be wearing comfortable enclosed footwear and loose-fitting clothes. If space is an issue, the test can be carried out over 4 metres, 6 metres or 10 metres, either indoors or outside.
Hi Greg, this test is to measure your normal walking speed and your fastest walking speed. So when I say go, I just want you to walk at your normal walking speed to the second orange cones, then I'll get you to come back and we'll do it again at your fastest walking speed, and we'll get Andy to demonstrate. Hi Andy, when I say go, please walk at your normal walking speed to the second set of orange cones. Ready and go. All right, Andy, and now at your fastest walking speed, as safe as you can, and go. And that's the test, Greg.
It is important to ensure that the walkway allows 2 metres either side of the start and stop markers to ensure consistency of gait speed. That is, we don't want the speed to be influenced by accelerating to full speed at the start of the test or decelerating at the end of the test. Walking speed is worked out by dividing distance by time. This test is best repeated up to 3 times for each of the walking speeds, with the average of the 3 trials taken as the result for both the normal walking speed and for their fastest walking speed.
Okay, great. So what I need you to do is walk to the second set of orange cones at your normal walking speed. Then I'll get you to come back and we'll do the same thing at your fastest walking speed, but as safe as you can. And go. Okay, same thing, but at your fastest walking speed, but as safe as you can. And go. Great. Today we did the test over 4 metres due to space limitations, but ideally the test should be done over 10 metres or 6 metres.
The following table shows comfortable and fast gait speeds in meters per second for males and females by decade. There are a range of normative values for walking speed depending on age group and gender. Generally, those older adults with a normal walking speed of less than 1 meter per second may need intervention to reduce falls risk and will require a referral to a physiotherapist, exercise physiologist, or a falls prevention exercise class. Those with normal walking speeds of less than 0.4 meters per second indicates that they have restricted mobility and may require a walking aid and a referral to a physiotherapist.
So the World Falls Guidelines is actually less than 0.8 meters per second, not 1 meter per second. So the latest is that if they walk more slowly than 0.8 meters a second, they're at risk of falls. That's also the same number for a frailty score, so that they're, they've got clinical frailty. The other tool or screening tool that is very easy to implement and doesn't require a lot of space, and the reason I've included it here is for those reasons. If you don't have a lot of space to carry out either of the other two tests, the 5 times sit to stand, it does have evidence to support it, but it's not as strong. So the evidence is not as strong as with the gait speed test and also the timed up and go. So I'm not going to show that now because we don't have time, but I've just included it there just because it is a very useful tool. And also it's 15 seconds. So it's, if they take longer than 15 seconds to do it, then they are at risk of falling. And also if they use their hands to stand up, that's a 0 score and they're at risk of falling. So just thinking about safety considerations, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, it's really important to think about all the, the risk versus benefit to an intervention. And when people are working on their balance, I always say to them that the balance exercises are trying to make them fall. So they need to make themselves safe before they do the activity. On the left, I just thought this was interesting. I asked Copilot, so AI, what were the safety considerations to consider when implementing a falls prevention program. So I've just got that there because people wipe out AI and say that we shouldn't be using it, but actually it does give us some very valuable information when it's not lying to us. But that was a good summary of the safety interventions for falls prevention. And there's things that we need to consider, particularly with the older people. And we often look at safety considerations. We think about all the patient factors, the environmental factors, and then the intervener, so the therapist or the person doing the intervention. So it's important to look at all of these factors. So some general safety considerations about the individual themselves are obviously that they're fit to participate, but then there's also quite a lot that we've got to think about with the venues and with our own safety as well as the person's safety. So always making sure that our insurance indemnity, liability insurance is up to date. And interestingly, a lot of the insurance companies won't insure venues or won't insure organisations unless the person delivering the program has their qualifications and shows their qualifications. some special considerations and precautions in the older adults is remembering that they've got a longer adaptation and recovery period, that they have a lower physiological reserve and impaired temperature regulation. So it's really important that they exercise in a mild temperature, not extremes of hot or cold. Just remembering that as well as being at falls risk, a lot of them have osteoporosis. Many will have diabetes, so we've got to think about that as well as their propensity to falling. And often there'll be some cognitive impairment or a reduction in alertness. And then there's the other cardiovascular issues that we might have to think about. Most of them have some sort of muscular skeletal involvement, and then there's the neurological conditions. So we've got to the end of the talk now. We've got a few minutes left for questions. So hopefully you have some questions that I can answer now.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Marianne. So if you've got those questions, please send them through. We have 8 minutes remaining in this presentation. So I'll give you a minute or so just to send those through. So we'll just hold on for a minute while you get those questions through.
If we don't have any questions, I could go back and show the sit to stand screening tool.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Strength and balance screening tests. 5 times sit to stand test. The 5 times sit to stand test is a quick screening test that measures leg strength, speed, and coordination. To start, you will need a sturdy chair of a height of 43 centimeters to 45 centimeters without armrests, and a stopwatch. The client should be wearing comfortable enclosed footwear and loose-fitting clothes.
Hi Greg, this test is designed to measure your leg strength and how quickly and easily you can sit down and stand up from a chair. So Andy's going to demonstrate for us. First up, while seated, you'll cross your arms across your chest, and when I say go, you'll stand up and sit down 5 times as quickly as you can. Ready, Andy? And go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Simple as that.
It is helpful to provide supervision to clients performing this test, especially if they have issues with their balance. Count each stand out loud so that the client remains oriented. It is not recommended for the client to touch the back of the chair after each repetition. Stop the test when the client's buttock touches the chair after the 5th repetition. Ensure that the testing chair is consistent for each retest.
Okay, Greg, when I say go, I'd like you to stand up and sit down 5 times as quickly and safely as you can. And go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Down. Good, well done. And that's the 5 sit to stand test.
The following table shows estimate values for normal performance in community dwelling for older adults. A time of greater than or equal to 12 seconds indicates that the client has reduced leg strength and speed. This may increase their risk of a fall and may guide the need for further assessment, referrals, and management. Common exercises that would be given for those with reduced leg strength may be sit to stands, squats, and step-ups.
We have had one question come through.
Yeah.
If you do have time to answer that one.
Sure.
So the question is, how do you assess frailty versus falls risk, and how do they overlap?
Okay, so the ICOM, which is the International something of outcome measures, they have an older person's inventory of different outcome measure assessments that they recommend. So 2 of those are the walk speed test. So again, if someone is frail, their walking speed will be slower than 0.8 meters per second. The frailty score that they recommend is the Canadian frailty score. And again, if you just search on Canadian frailty score, it's a pictorial and description for different categories of frailty, from robust and not frail at all, to different degrees of frailty. So just the Canadian frailty score is the way of assessing that.
Great. So next question, would a balance test such as Berg be recommended as standard assessment procedure?
So yes. So that is one of the recommendations in the World Falls Guidelines. There's a number of different recommendations. Every time I read it, I get something else out of the World Falls Guidelines. They're very, very comprehensive, and there's a lot of information in there. The Berg Balance Scale is definitely improved. It's not something that I personally use, just because it's takes more time, basically, in the situations that I work in, which is often in a gym or in a community centre. So that's why I use more of the tools that I've presented today.
Perfect. And we've got time for one last question. So the question is, in relation to 21% of retired people engaging in exercise, is this a figure for Australia, America, or a mean percentage for nations taking part in World Falls prevention?
So I'm pretty sure that study, and I can't remember what part of America it was or how many subjects it looked at, but no, it was a US population of community dwelling older adults, which I think for them is also 65 plus. So it was done in America, those numbers.
Fantastic. All right, everyone. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's webinar. A big thank you to Marianne and Injury Matters for working with us to make this session possible. Please look for upcoming webinars at the ESSA Professional Development Centre. ESSA is constantly working on PD opportunities for you. At the end of the presentation, you'll be directed to a survey. We'd really appreciate if you take the time to complete this because we value your feedback, and we want to ensure that we're providing you with the best and most relevant PD. Your CPD points and certificate will be added to your CPD logbook within 7 days. A copy of the recording and workbook will also be made available for you to access via the Learning Centre under the completed tab within 7 days. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you at another ESSA webinar very soon.